don't you think that's true? When you watch, you're not like,
that
a
could
little
be.
bit.
This is a real nuanced conversation. Ben Lindbergh, who is really a pretty savvy baseball writer, wrote a pretty detailed article, I don't know if it was 2 weeks ago or last week at The Ringer, talking about what Jesse just brought up, about baseball, in a sense, if you want to call it a problem, still is a strikeout problem. But he knows, and I think I talked about this with Yurko, that basically for the better part of 130 years, the strikeout rate has always increased. Always. Very rarely has it not. Like, if you look at the graph, it is almost always gone up and up and up and up. Pitchers are too good. Today, they are too specialized. They throw too hard. The only real answer to me, Jess, is limiting how many pitchers you can have on a roster. And I mean vastly reducing the number from what it is now. It's the only way you're going to reduce strikeouts, I think.
Yeah, let's explain that to people. That's Theo's big idea, 11-man pitching staffs. The reasoning being more of them, using them more will tire them out a little bit. They won't use max effort every pitch because they have to save something, and there'll be more contact put back in the game. But there's probably some unintended consequences. That'll probably just lead to more injuries than more contact, right?
I don't know. It could.
I would think so.
Or then you get the old school guys who say pitchers need to pitch more and they won't get hurt as much.
Maybe.
I don't have a good answer for it. Believe me, I know it's a hard thing, but
the league showed me that graph that you just said. Basically, from 1900 to today, it's been a straight arrow up. There's never been a leveling off of the strikeout total. So they're trying to come up with ideas. In fact, they asked me, "Do you have any ideas?" They don't have an answer. They tossed around lowering the mound, but they're not going to experiment with that. They did experiment with the rubber back a foot. Wasn't enough. It'd have to be like 3 feet, and that would probably lead to more injuries. They don't have a great answer. Here's what the answer might be. And it goes back to the strikeouts going up the way it has. They think, and I'll use their word, the geometry of the strike zone doesn't fit today's game. And the key would be lowering it. In other words, do not call the high strike. That's where players can't catch up, and that's where a lot of the strikeouts happen. Don't call the high strike. Players will lay off. Pitchers will have to come into the zone. But again, I almost think that might just lead to more home runs, not necessarily, more contact. I guess more contact in terms of home runs. I don't know. But that's one thing they're talking about. And the other thing about that is they may have to adjust the strike zone, because if they go to ABS, it needs a little adjustment for it to work. So that could be something they try.
How would that work in terms of, like, what is the technology in that? I'm curious. Does it immediately sort of map the player's height and adjust the strike zone to that? Because they're not, like, everybody's strike zone isn't the same. How does that work?
Yeah, no, you're on the right path. You're on the right path there.
Asshole!
And from what I understand, if they implemented it right now, strikeouts would go up. Because it would be calling the corners much more than umpires do. And also, they kind of like the umpires, they looked at the data.
Damn it!
On 0-2 pitches, the umps shrink the zone a little bit. On 3-0 pitches, they expand the zone a little bit. They sort of give the hitter and a pitcher, maybe it's subconsciously, a little bit of a chance, depending on who's got the advantage.
Did you back in there?
Yeah, just here and there. It's not an overly obvious thing. So here's my point. I don't think they're ever, or not in the near future, going to go to the full ABS. I think it will be the challenge system for the 3 a game, the egregious, obvious to the world calls. And I'm sure teams will say, hey, don't use ours until the 7th inning. Don't use it unless there's 2 strikes, because it can't be the manager who challenges. Got to be the pitcher, catcher, or hitter, because they're the only ones that know. Manager can't do it in real time. So all this is still in play. But yes, it will adjust the zone based on the hitter's stance and everything else.
All right, interesting.
So fast.
Yeah, I think that's like the next hurdle, I guess, for them. They want to try to figure out.
We're really heading this direction, huh?
Oh, yeah.
That is so wild.
So. But I think all the other rules changes have been great. They have to be ecstatic with, sort of the action on the bases, just the time of game. People don't have the appetite to sit around. I'm sorry, they just don't spend 3.5 hours watching games anymore. There's too much out there. There's too much to do. There's too much there's too much competition in the space. So they have to be thrilled with all that, I'm sure.
They are. They're 100% thrilled. They think the rules are going well. I mean, there's adjustments. In fact, I have a story exclusively at ESPN.com about to go up that they're going to adjust one rule. Did you see Wilson Contreras with Kenley Jansen last Saturday. He looked like he was ready to hit, but he had 1 foot out of the box.
Oh, I did see it.
Yeah, and they called the violations on Jansen. They're making it clear that next time around it's going to be on the hitter. You can't pretend to be ready but be out of the box because pitchers aren't allowed to quick pitch, and that turned into a quick pitch.
Yes.
So inducing a quick pitch is now illegal. I mean, I imagine these umpires need a raise. I mean, just because of all this stuff they have to do compared to a year ago. But so they're just tweaking on the edges, but nothing major. They like how it's going. The next off the field hurdle is the fact that the Mets have a $350 million payroll, and the bottom team, I'm not even sure, the A's have like a $60 million payroll.
That's a problem.
The union says there's always been payroll disparity, and they always cry there's a problem. The league says, no, this is getting worse and worse with these young sort of billionaire owners that are willing to spend, and then the old school guys that won't, and so there's a kind of back and forth on that. But I think it's probably going to get to a point where they have to adjust. The union just doesn't want the salary cap, which they think the league wants.
They've never wanted it. In New York, they're upset that they've got a $350 million payroll and they're below 500. That's what they're upset about in New York. They're booing Verlander last night. That's what they did in New York.
This is where the league doesn't have a leg to stand on in some ways, because they say money equals wins, and it's just not fair to the small market teams. Yet the Rays do what the Rays do.
Okay, let's do it.
Look at San Diego, look at the Mets. But this is just a snapshot. Over a 10-year period, money does equal wins, right? The Yankees never dip way down like the Reds, Pirates, and other teams. The Rays are an outlier. The Rays are an interesting team in a lot of ways. They're scouting development. They also don't have to really answer to fans in the sense like nobody cares. Nobody cares if they don't sign the big free agent. If the Yankees go 2 years without signing a free agent, all hell breaks loose. So the Rays are in an interesting spot, but they take advantage of it by winning games.
They do. They're a great story. All right, a couple other things here before we let Jesse go, just on the Cubs and Sox.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, look, the Sox, it beats the alternative, don't get me wrong, and they stunk against Cleveland. But with Dion and I were saying it, like, at what point are they going to really get it in gear and go? I don't know that they're capable of it. And part of the problem is, like, they've got too much redundancy, Jess. You know, like, Berger and Sheets should get at bats, but at the same time, they're players who can't really play a defensive position. They're second and third on the team in home runs. Neither one of them has 100 at bats. It just speaks to, like, some of the glaring issues that this team has in the way they've been built and constructed. And because of that, I don't know that there is any sort of put it in gear and go moment.
Yeah, we talked about this all last year. They never found that moment, and that was a 500 team. This is not a 500 team, and it's hard to see. But they did have 12 hits against Bieber. That's a career high for Bieber. So you're always looking for that spark. But I think you're right. I mean, it really reminds me of like the 18-19 Cubs, even the 20 Cubs. The parts are better than the sum. Look at the box score from last night. Look at the names on the left side, the visiting Cleveland Guardians, and the right side. The names on the right side are so much better. Yes, Cleveland has Ramirez, has Juan, but you look 1 through 9, the Sox should be better, but they're not, because parts don't always equal a better sum. And I think you're right. It's redundancy. It's a lack of defense because of that redundancy in a lot of ways. I mean, 10 years can he keep that up? So we're always looking for that spark, but we did that all last year and never found it. So until further notice, I don't think it's right.
This is too long. I don't know.
You can fall back on. Now they're in a 3-city trip, a tough one, without Nico Horner, without Bellinger short term. It's just like a perfect storm. We know teams go through these perfect storms. Hendricks will help in it. He's probably back within a week after he makes one more rehab start, as long as everything checks out okay. Bellinger's day-to-day. Nico Horner, I wonder, Carmen, you know I mentioned this Tim Anderson stat to you a million times. I wonder in a few years, if we look back at Nico Horner in the lineup as opposed to out of the lineup, and a dramatic win-loss difference with the Cubs. I mean dramatic, like it is with Tim Anderson. You expect a drop-off, but with Tim out, it's a dramatic. And I wonder if Nico's the same thing. He's such a spark plug for that team, though Morel is obviously providing some energy. They just have no part of their game going well right now, which has put a focus on David Ross, there's no doubt. I think he needs to be better, but the blame on David Ross should be equal to the blame on the players, equal to the blame on Jed Hoyer. You know what I mean? Like, there's enough